Hello. So today we're going to be discussing theories. And when we discuss theories, we'll also be discussing phenomenon. Anyway, so these are things that are what we notice in psychology. These are things that we actually um, physically can witness. I have a little example of a phenomenon here. Um, you guys can do this on your own time because it's a little awkward on a video, but I want you to look at these words and try to just don't write anything down at this point. Just look at these words and look at these words for 30 seconds and yeah, look at these words for 30 seconds and then I give you a distraction. I'm not going to play this video because it will probably take me to a different screen, which I'll have to just stop sharing this one so I can share that one. But if you remember classic Vines, it is where they are doing this little baton twirling exercise and Patricia drops hers and the person who's filming goes, "Patricia!" And everyone's like, "Ooh, don't drop it next time, sweetie," to that effect. Then I want you to write down as many words as you remember. So those words that I showed you before, you'll write down as many as you can recall. And yeah, so chances are with that, as you write down words, after having that distraction of watching that short video or just any sort of distraction so those words aren't fresh in your head, you will experience a phenomenon of either the primacy effect or the recency effect. You're more likely to recall words either at the beginning of that list because they seem more important. They were the first ones you saw, so they stick in your mind. Or the recency effect states, that's the primacy effect. The recency effect states that you're more likely to recall the last words in the list because those were the last ones that you saw. They're the most fresh in your mind. So that would be an example of a phenomenon. You see words and you're able to recall the most recent ones or the last ones on the list or the ones at the top with the primacy effect. In terms of why that happens, the explanation as to why you're more likely to recall the first words or the last words in the list, that goes more into theory. But the effect of it, the effect itself, you recall more words at the beginning or at the end of a list, that is a phenomenon. It's something that you can observe through systematic research. So I give you guys the words. I give you guys a distractor task showing you a video of some sort that has nothing to do with those words, and then test you or just have you guys write as many as you remember. Some other examples of phenomena, are listed here. So the bystander effect, and there's links to this again as you guys follow along with the PowerPoint. You can click on these links and watch videos about them. But just as a quick explanation, the bystander effect is essentially where the more people that are present in a situation, the less likely one person is likely to help. So I've seen many different examples of a bystander effect. The video, I believe, is showing a person on the street and they look physically in pain. They're groaning. They're like, ugh. People are walking past them. And actually the video kind of takes a fun turn. Well, not fun, but an interesting take on it where the person that's groaning on the floor is dressed as a homeless person, dressed not to the nines. And then that same person is dressed in a business suit, like more professional attire. And notice how the bystander effect tends to change when that's the case. But essentially, the bystander effect is saying that the more people, if someone's needing help or in danger or something is going on with an individual, the more people that are present, the less likely that one individual is going to help. That's the bystander effect. In terms of explanations as to why, again, that's more theory-based. The why is the theory, but the what's going on, what do you see, what is happening is the phenomenon. Excuse me. Another example of a phenomenon is the fundamental attribution error. And we are all most likely guilty of this. This is where you are more likely to attribute people's shortcomings to flaws in their personality, or flaws just how, or maybe not necessarily flaws, but just how they are as an individual, versus when you have shortcomings, you're more likely to attribute it to what's going on in your life, the environment. So for example, if you're driving and someone is whipping through traffic and they're just cutting people off or driving rather aggressively, you might be, the fundamental attribution error will be like, wow, what a freaking asshole. He just cut me off, that dick. But if you were to do that, if you're going through traffic, if you're cutting people off and going really fast, or distributing or displaying aggressive driving behaviors, it could be, I'm late for work. I have to, I can't be late. Or maybe my wife's having her baby and I got to get to the hospital. When you don't know, maybe that person that was doing that, when you experience them doing that, maybe they're going through the same thing. Maybe they're late for work. Maybe their wife is in the hospital having a baby, or maybe something is going on that's fueling them to drive aggressively. But the fundamental attribution error is saying, for yourself, I have a reason, and it's because of environmental factors. I'm late for work. I have stuff going on, something. But for other people, it's, they're an asshole. That's just a person that is an asshole that just drove past me and cut me off. And it's not always, it's not obvious. Obviously, the fundamental attribution error doesn't just apply to driving, but I feel like that's an easy example. The McGurk effect, again, you can watch this video, is where you can watch someone say like a word or like do a phrase, and you can watch their lips moving, but the sound starts to change. It's hard for me to really describe. It's easier to see it. So I just suggest that you watch the McGurk effect video for a better explanation than I could ever provide. The placebo effect is where you have the placebo. Okay, so the placebo effect is simply you think that you're going to have some sort of treatment from a particular thing, but it's not really what you think it is. But since you're doing it, since you're taking this pill, you feel the effects. So an example would be, I have a cold, or I have the sniffles, and I take, let's say I have allergies, and I take an allergy pill. Before that pill actually has any likelihood of working, like within the first 5 minutes, because pills take a little bit of time to actually start working in your system. You have to swallow it, your stomach has to digest it, that has to make its way to the rest of your body, etc. But within 5 minutes of taking that, either ibuprofen if you've got a headache, or allergy pills if you've got mad allergies, you're likely to feel better simply because you've taken a pill you believe is going to work. This also works for literal placebo pills, where it's just a sugar pill. It's nothing really, no active ingredient is in there to reduce your headache or reduce your allergic reactions. But the fact that you've taken a pill that you believe is going to work, suddenly you feel better. And oftentimes with medical research, when they're testing new medications, they utilize the placebo effect. They give people both, they give their participants the actual treatment pill that they're testing to see how well it works, and they give them a placebo pill, again, just a sugar pill. And if the effects are the same, if both groups are feeling better, but at the same rate, the treatment isn't, the pill that they're creating isn't really that effective. But if that treatment pill that they're testing, if that tests way higher than the placebo, because you're always going to feel better if you take a pill, that's the placebo effect at work. Well, if that treatment pill that they're testing to see if it should go on the market, if that performs statistically significantly higher than the placebo, then okay, we're working with something here. We're cooking with gasoline now. And lastly, social facilitation is where when someone else is present, you're going to be doing better. So one example is, I don't know, if you're in a spin class or something, or if you're exercising by yourself, you might, do some reps, and you'll do, couple of runs on the old treadmill or something exercise related here. But when someone else is present, maybe you have a workout buddy or just the gym is filled with other people, social facilitation is saying that you're going to try harder, you're going to work harder, you'll perform better when other people are present. If you have this feeling of an audience watching you or just present as you're performing this task, you're more likely to do better. And that kind of has a lot of different caveats to it as well. If you have experience with it and you have an audience, you're going to perform better. But if you're a little shaky on something and you have an audience, you can perform actually worse because of that feeling of an audience watching you when you're not entirely set on, oh yeah, I know my ABCs, but please do. So the term phenomenon is used when it's been replicated multiple times. You can't just say, one time my cousin did this thing and it worked for him, but I've never seen him do it since. I don't know. But it's typically used when it's been replicated multiple times. We don't call it a phenomenon if it's happened once and never happened again. So I talked about how a phenomenon is what happens, like with the primacy and recency effect, where again, more likely to recall words at the beginning of a list with the primacy or at the end of a list with the recency effect. Now, theories are explaining as to why that happens. So it's important to keep those distinctions, it's important to keep those distinctions in mind. You can physically observe a phenomenon. You can see someone not helping someone on the side of the street with the bystander effect. You can see someone performing better when someone is watching them with the social facilitation. You can see that. Theories are explaining them. Why does that happen? So for example, with the primacy and recency effect, well, the primacy effect, where you're recalling words at the beginning of a list, I kind of mentioned that a little earlier. The theory could be, well, it could be at the point where it's actually stored in your long-term memory. It could also be that you see those first words and you think that they are more important because they're the first ones you see. So perhaps there's some, subconscious thing in your head that's saying these are important because they're first. With the recency effect, again, the words are more likely being recalled at the end of a list. Those are still in your short-term memory. They're still floating around in there before you've forgotten them. So those are still relatively fresh in your short memory storage to where you're able to recall them, given that the distraction isn't too long. So again, theories are used to explain a phenomenon. For bystander effect, where the more people that are present for a person in danger or in trouble of some sort, a person needing assistance or something is going on, bystander effect says that the more people are present, the less likely that anyone's going to help. If you know the case of Kitty Genovese, she was murdered in New York and murdered by a high-rise apartment building where there were I think there were 60 people living there, probably more than 60 people. There's actually probably hundreds of people living in this apartment building, but no one really reached out to help because everyone assumed someone else would do something. So part of the theory that explains why the bystander effect happens, why the more people that are present, the less likely people are to help, that's a theory that can be explained, or that's a phenomenon that can be explained by the diffusion of responsibility, where, oh, someone else will take care of it. Essentially, that's a summary of what the diffusion of responsibility is. The more people you see around you, or the more people you feel are present, the more likely you're going to think, well, someone else will call the cops, or someone else will, go up to that gentleman and see what's going on, or what have you. Diffusion of responsibility. It's not just me that's seeing this, so other people can do something. So we have perspectives when it comes to theories. And this is just the broad outlook, the field you could think of that people use to describe something happening. So we have the biological perspective, and they could use something like genetics or how our bodies work. We have the just different aspects of our bodies. So maybe it's a brain thing or something within our brains that's causing us, or that is influential in having us do this having social facilitation take place, or having the diffusion of responsibility take place, etc. While the behavioral perspective in psychology, that is more so as a result of the environment. So reinforcement, punishment, you know, operational conditioning. Depending on which perspective, you can have multiple perspectives for theories. Obviously, you can have the biological perspective, the behavioral perspective, the cognitive perspective, and each of these perspectives can provide a different explanation to any particular phenomenon. So you have a model of theories as well, which is a more precise explanation of a specific phenomenon. So when you think about the theory of grief, the Kubler-Ross model of grief, it's that denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance in any which order. That's a very precise explanation. You know, oh, here's these 5 steps, and it's referring to a specific phenomenon. So the grief of losing something, be it a person or maybe a job, something that's important to you. A model theory is where it kind of has this very precise explanation, and it has steps, or it has, you know, more than just, oh, the more people present, the less likely someone's going to do something. Oh, well, you diffuse that responsibility to someone else. That could apply to a lot of different things. That could apply to someone in danger. That could apply to you sitting in an office and you smell smoke. If no one else is responding to the smoke, you might not respond. You might, but you may not as well. That if there's a lot of people in the room and they're smelling smoke and no one seems to be responding to it, you're just going to be like, okay, guess we'll die here. But please don't, you know, stand up. So here's some examples of different perspectives, theoretical perspectives. I'm not going to go over all of these, so you can look over them in your own time. But it talks about the focus and some phenomena and some example theories within those as well. So the reason why we have theories, we have uses for theories. One is to organize information. So it helps make phenomena easier to understand if we have a bit of an organizational process to our theories. So we have, oh, general intelligence influences our numerical, spatial, and verbal abilities. Well, let's organize to where we have this numerical, spatial, and verbal ability phenomena, or excuse me, we have these theories to explain how our intelligence works. So once we organize it, it makes it easier to understand. With theories in place, we can also predict what will happen in new situations. So I talked about, oh, you know, with the bystander effect, you know, the video shows a person on the side of the street and no one's really helping them. But with the theories being used as a predictor, you can also think of the diffusion of responsibility. Oh, other people are present, they're likely not going to help. Or the more people that are present, I'm likely not going to help, or at least more likely. And but that could be applied to different situations. Like I mentioned, with if you're sitting in an office and there's a lot of people in the office and you smell smoke or something weird is going on and no one else is responding to it, then the diffusion of responsibility theory can be applied to that new situation. And you can predict that, yeah, it's probably the same thing's probably going to happen. If no one's responding and there's a bunch of people there, probably not going to happen. Finally, the forming new theories. You can use the old theories to form new ones. Scientific research is always constantly updating. Theories can be out of date. Theories can need just that tweaking to fit for the time period we have now. There's always a reason why new theories need to be formed. Nothing in science is set in stone, but rather set in tentative stone. So I mentioned this, the phenomena versus theory. So I mentioned how when people recall items presented at the beginning or end of the list, they're more likely to remember them. Explanations, or the theory behind this, is that, again, with the first item in the list, it's initially distinguishable from previous activity. So this is the first thing you're seeing, you know, before, like, oh, come sit down into my office, welcome to my world. And then the first thing you see in this new office experience are these words, these first couple words. That's the first thing you remember. And it, like I said earlier, it may be transferred to long-term memory by the time that you're asked to actually recall them. And then items at the end of the list are could still be in your short-term memory store. So, excuse me. The drive theory, where we're comparing performance with or without an audience. This is the social facilitation task. And like I mentioned earlier as well, for practiced tasks that you're good at or just easy tasks, when people are present, you're more likely to make correct responses, so you're more likely to perform better. And then unpracticed or difficult tasks, like if you're learning how to play piano and you're still kind of trying to figure out all the notes and you got an audience now, you're probably more likely to make a lot of mistakes if you feel, as opposed to you being by yourself tickling the ivories. So here you have the theory. So that's what happens when you know the task or it's easy and you have an audience, you're going to do well, perform very well. And if you're unpracticed or if it's a difficult task for you and you have an audience, you're more likely to make mistakes. So the theory of social facilitation and social inhibition is part of the reason why that happens. So we have the phenomenon of what happens. Now we have the theory as to why it happens. So again, this is performing a task creates a sense of general physiological arousal. And you're more likely, when you have that arousal taking place, the dominant response is more likely to occur. So again, if you have experience in it, the dominant response is, I got this. If you don't have experience in it, the dominant response is, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to start, making mistakes when I'm trying to play chopsticks or what have you. So the characteristics of theories, they have formality and they have scope. So for formality, this is the extent to which they are precise or formal. And the scope is just how far it's able to expand to different things. So the diversity of phenomena that are explained is referred to as the scope. So if your theory has a wide scope, it's going to cover a lot of different phenomena. If it has a very narrow scope, it's going to be a more narrow phenomena. Just like how I was talking about the model, the Kubler-Ross model of grief, that's a pretty narrow scope in terms of we're only referring to grief here. But then when we talk about the diffusion of responsibility, that can be applied to a lot of different situations. So also, no, I didn't say this. Just kidding. So multiple theories, people use multiple theories to describe multiple phenomena. Actually, I did say this. Coming back around. But anyway, so depending on what your field is, the perspective that you take, be it the biological perspective or the evolutionary perspective, the cognitive perspective, behavioral perspective, you will use that to describe certain phenomena. God, it's such a hard word to say over and over again. But depending on what your field or what perspective you choose to take, you can take the exact same phenomena and you describe it differently, describe as to why it happens differently. A cognitive psychologist is going to describe memory very differently, describing why the primacy or recency effect happens very differently as opposed to a behavioral psychologist. Cognitive psychologists are more so concerned with, memory is a function of your brain and it's a function, well, I mean, not that behaviorists don't feel that as well, but memory is a function of all your brain processes and possibly how you feel about something or how you think about certain things. Whereas a behaviorist is going to describe memory as, well, you've been exposed to this behavior before as in your environment, and so your response to it is going to be more conditioned to an extent. So these theories can be complementary, they can work together, or they can contradict. They can be competing against one another. And it really just depends on what it is that you're looking at. So for dissociative identity disorder, the art is formerly known as multiple personality disorders, but don't call it that. We have the sociocognitive theory, where patients were aware of having the disorder, they know its characteristics or features, and sometimes they're encouraged to take on multiple personalities by the therapist. Whereas the post-traumatic theory of having dissociative identity disorder is that these personalities are a way of coping with trauma. Again, the post-traumatic theory is stating that you have these multiple aspects to your personality because you're coping with something, as opposed to the sociocognitive theory where they're aware they have this. They're not something that, these personalities just came into after this X event happened in my life, but they're actually encouraged by their therapist to hone these personalities or to take on these personalities. So these are kind of competing theories in terms of describing the dissociative identity disorder. So that's that. Again, what I want you guys to take away from this lesson today is that phenomena are what you can actually witness. It's the what in terms of what happens. So something you can empirically observe through systematic observation. You can see someone remembering the first word, writing down and recalling the first or last words in the list. You can see people walk past someone who needs help because they think someone else is going to take care of it. And the theory is why that happens. So again, why do we recall the words at the beginning, at the end, or the end of the list? Oh, because of long-term memory for the first words in the list. The primacy effect, you're more likely to remember the first words because they're likely to be transferred into long-term memory at this point. Or the recency effect, oh, they're still in your short-term memory. Or with the bystander effect, that's the what. You walk past people, the more people that are present, the less likely someone is to help. But the why that happens is the diffusion of responsibility. You kind of think someone else is going to do it. You're diffusing that responsibility away from yourself and onto others. And there's a lot more theories as to explaining the bystander effect, but that's the one I'm sticking with. So, or at least I'm going with right now. Anywho, so if you have any questions, you can always email me or contact me at any point. I have on my office hours. You stop by. I need people to talk to. But that is the theories lecture. If you are ready and willing, you can go on over to the ethics lecture and watch me rattle. So like and subscribe.